Straight ahead on Law and Crime Daily. Britney Spears' father will remain a co-conservator for now. A judge denying the pop icon's request 1 week after her emotional plea. Why Jamie Spears is now calling for an investigation.
This to me seems more like it has all the feel of crisis management.
And Bill Cosby is now a free man. What the disgraced comedian has to say about his conviction being thrown out. Plus, former President Trump's company and one of his longtime executives pleading not guilty to tax crime charges. And a NXIVM sex cult survivor is speaking out about why she blew the whistle on leader Keith Raniere and his accomplice, actor Allison Mack.
She's a monster, a sociopath.
Law and Crime's Anjanette Levy is here with that and more news from the court.
Brian, the judge in this case formalized a decision to make Jamie Spears the co-conservator of his daughter's estate as Spears requests an investigation into those disturbing allegations made by his daughter.
What do we want? Free Britney! When do we want it? Now!
A week after Britney Spears fans gathered outside the courthouse to listen to her speak about the conservatorship, her father, Jamie, is asking the court for an investigation.
I think he's been taking a lot of grief in the media.
In new court documents, Jamie Spears' attorneys say they want to determine the veracity of the allegations and claims made by Britney Spears and to determine what corrective actions, if any, need to be taken. California attorney Mark Garrigus, who represented Scott Peterson, has been watching the conservatorship case closely and has thoughts on the request for a hearing.
If your number one concern is your daughter, there are other ways to do this or handle this other than an evidentiary hearing. An evidentiary hearing is to do what? Is to make more of a spectacle out of this, to try to redeem yourself or something like that. It's not about you, it's about her.
In another filing, Jamie Spears casts any blame for his daughter's care on Jody Montgomery, the conservator of Britney Spears' person. Jamie Spears' attorneys write that he hasn't served in that role since 2019, and Montgomery has been in charge of Britney Spears' day-to-day personal care and medical treatment.
I think the judge has got little or no choice but to have a hearing. I think this judge is going to do the right thing. And I think the right thing here is to dial this back and relax some of these things and maybe appoint somebody else and try to refashion this in a way that is healthy or moves towards a healthy spot.
Now, Jamie Spears is the co-conservator of his daughter's estate, meaning he manages the money along with a trust company. He is asking the court to require Britney Spears to appear in the courtroom on July 14th to say exactly what she wants. Brian?
Thanks, Anjanette. Joining us today is legal analysts Dina Dahl and Terry Austin. Dina, do you find it odd that Jamie Spears neither denies or confirms Britney Spears' allegations? He just wants a hearing?
I mean, I imagine at this point, anything he says is based on what his lawyer is advising him, because he is acting in a legal capacity here as a conservator. And as we heard from Britney Spears, she may want to sue him. She thinks there could be criminal issues. So I imagine they're telling him not really to say much. We did hear a statement from Miss Montgomery herself. She said that there is no restriction for Britney Spears to get married or to have children with her conservatorship. So it's also possible the father thought that Miss Montgomery was addressing some of those specific issues.
Right, so maybe there's some legal issues there not to talk too much, or maybe just playing it close to the vest. Terry, could this hearing have Britney on the stand telling all?
I think she might. She certainly is going to give more information than we've heard from before. Last week, she spoke for 24 minutes, Brian, and it did not seem to move Judge Penny at all. Her decision is still as it has been, keeping the conservatorship there. I think 13 years is a very long time, and we know that she has not in any way, shape, or form shown any outward signs of depression or mental illness, and she still is not allowed to manage her personal or financial issues. So I think, and I've said this before, that there's something inherently wrong with the conservatorship system when someone who seems so much in control of her life isn't able to maintain that control herself.
Yeah, the judge seems to be punting the issue. Hopefully, we're at a point where it can be resolved. And Jeanette, what does Jody Montgomery have to say about this?
Well, Brian, I reached out to her representatives, her lawyers, and they sent this 2-page statement back to me in which Jody Montgomery and her lawyers say that they've been acting in Britney Spears' best interest while attending to her medical needs, her personal care needs during this whole time, since they've been in charge of her person since 2019. They said that her ability to get married, as Dina mentioned, and have children is not affected by this conservatorship. And the statement ends by saying that she's looking forward, Jody Montgomery is, to helping Britney Spears get on a path where she doesn't need to have somebody like her in charge of her personal affairs any longer.
Yeah, and that's the ultimate goal here. Hopefully this hearing brings us to a point where we can have an end of this conservatorship, but also a healthy Britney Spears who can resolve and take care of her own financial and personal issues. Thank you, everyone. Turning now to other top legal news making headlines, actor James Franco agrees to pay $2.2 million to settle a sexual misconduct lawsuit. The settlement would close a class action lawsuit brought by 2 of the actor's former students filed in 2019. Franco founded his own acting and filming school in 2014, where allegedly he would push his students into filming scenes they found to be increasingly inappropriate and sexually exploitive. Franco is widely known for his award-winning role in The Disaster Artist. The lawsuit names Franco's production company and partners as co-defendants. Franco would not have to admit wrongdoing. The settlement includes non-economic terms that have not been made public. And in New York, so-called Soho Karen pleaded not guilty to new felony hate crime charges. Police say 23-year-old Mia Poncetto falsely accused a black teen of stealing her phone last December. In a video that has since gone viral, she's seen demanding the phone back and tackling the teen. Poncetto is facing 2 charges of unlawful imprisonment, which now contain a hate crime enhancement. After court, attorneys for Poncetto accused prosecutors of overreaching, calling the charges shameful. Still ahead on Law and Crime Daily, the Trump Organization. Welcome back. Reaction is pouring in after the Pennsylvania Supreme Court overturned the conviction of my story. I have always maintained my innocence. Cosby was sentenced to 3 to 10 years in prison for drugging and sexually assaulting Temple University employee Andrea Constant. In 2005, Cosby reached a non-prosecutorial agreement with then Philadelphia District Attorney Bruce Castor. Castor is now known for representing former President Donald Trump at the impeachment proceedings. A new prosecutor brought criminal charges against Cosby in 2015, and he was convicted after a second trial. The Commonwealth's highest court ruled Cosby should have never been prosecuted because of the deal. Attorney Gloria Allred represents many of Cosby's accusers and says the decision was devastating for them.
They were very brave, and despite the Pennsylvania Supreme Court's decision, I want everyone to know that I do believe that this was a very important fight for justice.
While this decision says Cosby cannot be retried, Allred still is pursuing a civil lawsuit by Judith Huff against Cosby in California.
In that case, our client alleges in the lawsuit that she was the victim of child sexual abuse by Mr. Cosby at the Playboy Mansion in Southern California.
That case was stayed while Cosby's appeal in Pennsylvania was pending. Allred says she plans to be back in court for it to resume in August. Back with us is legal analyst Dina Dahl and Terry Austin. Terry, a technicality, exonerated, not guilty, a violation of constitutional rights. People are calling this so many different things. What do you call it?
Well, Brian, it's not a technicality, but it is a procedural decision involving a substantive constitutional issue, no question about it. The Pennsylvania Supreme Court vacated the conviction because Cosby was denied due process, and he was denied due process because he was promised, if he testified at this deposition, that it would not be used against him, and it was used against him. So I think the court made the right decision, but I think they got the remedy wrong. The remedy here really should have been that the case could be retried, just not using the evidence that they gathered from that deposition. The way the court decided, it says they can never retry this case, and that would really be giving any prosecutor the power to pardon people forever, and I don't think that's what's really intended.
Yeah, and you brought up the prosecutor, former prosecutor Castor had given that offer of a non-prosecutor agreement and then wasn't able to actually give it. And so, Dina, maybe it's the public defender in me, but why isn't there more blame being put on Castor for this fault of incorrectly extending that offer? And why are so many people looking at Cosby instead?
Well, it's interesting because in some ways his offer did have value because the victim there was able to then bring a civil suit. And Bill Cosby was no longer able to invoke the Fifth Amendment because they didn't have criminal charges hanging over him in connection with it. So he had to testify for 4 days. And that civil lawsuit resulted in a $3.3 million judgment. So without him giving that offer, saying he wasn't going to have criminal charges off the table, he would have been able to invoke the Fifth Amendment. She wouldn't have gotten that civil damages, most likely. So you could argue that the intended result of that prosecutor was effective. His intention was that she should recover in a civil court because he didn't think he could make charges stick in a criminal court.
Makes sense. It seemed like he tried to choose his battles, the civil over the criminal. The second prosecutor tried to get that criminal as well, but of course, as we see, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court overturned that decision. Thanks for that insight, both of you. Now let's check in on the live trials at the Law and Crime Network. First, with California versus Robert Durst. The wealthy real estate heir is on trial for the murder of his best friend, Susan Berman. Before this, Durst was tried for the murder of his neighbor, Moritz Black, whose dismembered remains were found in Galveston Bay. Durst admitted to the dismemberment, but claimed self-defense in the killing and was later acquitted. In court, attorneys are now reading transcribed testimonies from the Morris Black trial, including the medical examiner who confirmed that Black was dead 12 hours before being dismembered. Now to Colorado and the trial of Mark Redwine. A retired wildlife expert testified it's highly unlikely an animal attacked and killed Dylan Redwine in 2012. That's been one of the main arguments from the defense. Dylan's remains were found in different locations off Middle Mountain Road. His skull was found 2 years after his other remains. The prosecution says Dylan died from blunt force trauma to the skull caused by Mark Redwine. Make sure to check out the Law and Crime Network for gavel-to-gavel coverage of both of those trials. Coming up on Law and Crime Daily, harsh work. Welcome back. Prosecutors unsealed a 15-count indictment against the company of the former president and its chief financial officer. They're pleading not guilty to all accusations. Alan Weissenberg and the Trump Organization pleaded not guilty to allegations of a 15-year scheme to defraud. Prosecutors allege that from March 2005, larceny in the second degree, criminal tax fraud in the third degree, and falsifying business records in the first degree. The charges are the first for the Manhattan DA's 2-year investigation into the company, which fought all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court over tax records. The former president is calling the charges a disgrace and a continuation of the witch hunt. Let's bring back legal analyst Dina Dahl and co-host Terry Austin. Terry, the charges range in terms of sentencing. I know the grand larceny in the second degree is a Class C felony. We can do up to 15 years. Do you see this being a trial or maybe both sides working out a plea deal?
Brian, let's hope it's a plea deal. If you just take how long it took to get the tax records, it took several years. You can just imagine how long it's going to take to try this case. Not only that, but the testimony is going to be extremely dry. This is all about tax fraud. So you're going to be hearing records and discussions about entries into their tax forms. And I think we'd be wasting taxpayer dollars. I think what might happen is we might see Alan Weissenberg, we might see him do a plea deal and cooperate in exchange for more information about the Trump Organization, since he knows so much about the ins and outs of all of the finances.
Yeah, if there was to be a plea deal, they would have to strike at least the top 2, maybe 3 counts, because some of those charges are mandatory jail time. We'll see how that plays out, though. Dina, is this it for a 2-year investigation, or do you see this as being the first indictment of many?
Well, prosecutors certainly hope that this is the first of many, and it will most likely depend on whether or not Mr. Weisselberg cooperates. It's possible that they're looking into manipulation of property values and bank fraud charges, but the one charge that everybody is looking for is Michael Cohen says that Mr. Weisselberg was the one who was able to kind of hide the Stormy Daniels hush payment. That payment would be a campaign violation charge against Mr. Trump himself. Did that occur? Will we ever find out? Only probably if Mr. Weisselberg cooperates.
Well, time will tell. We'll see how that plays out. Thank you. When we come back, we sit down with one of the NXIVM whistleblowers, her reaction to actor Allison Mack's 3-year sentence for the former sex cult participation after the break. Welcome back. One of the victims and a whistleblower of the NXIVM sex cult is speaking out after Allison Mack was sentenced to prison. Our Adam Classfeld was there as the judge handed down strong words to the former Smallville actor.
Allison Mack was just sentenced to 3 years in prison, far below the federal sentencing guidelines. There were questions about whether she would get anywhere from 14 to 17 years. The judge went far below that at an emotional 90-minute hearing where 2 victims spoke. One of them called Allison Mack, the Smallville actress, and Keith Raniere the most evil monsters she ever met.
Honestly, her eyes looked dead. It was very much like that feeling of a sociopath where she was actually able to receive what I was saying.
The government recommended that she would get a lighter sentence because of her cooperation right before the trial. She shared evidence about the secret sisterhood, the organization DOS, within the NXIVM cult that led to the conviction of Keith Raniere.
What was it like during the victim impact statement?
The judge found that she was both, in the words of DOS, both a master and a slave, that she was said to be by the judge both a perpetrator and something of a victim herself, which made for part of the difficulty, according to Judge Garifas, in sentencing her.
I sat down with Jessica Jones earlier today, and she says Allison Mack actually mailed her a letter apologizing before the sentencing.
I didn't feel much. And I'm a deeply empathetic, highly sensitive person. And it was a lot of buzzwords. It was a lot of fluffy generalizations. There was no real indication that she had any sense of a pinky's worth of what I went through. Just like, I can't imagine what you went through. I know you can't imagine what I went through. On top of that, you know, and I'm so sorry isn't gonna cut it. And also when she's just blaming Keith made me do this, it was his teachings. No, that is not that. I've seen her, I've witnessed her, I've felt her. That is you. We all have a choice in life, and yes, can people be brainwashed? Can people be coerced to do things that they maybe wouldn't normally do? 100%, but she was a leader at the helm. There was something she got off in doing this. There was something that the sense of power over these women that she loved, that was her own thing. Keith just helped her cultivate that.
Dina, 3 years where it could have been 14 to 17, does that seem like just a slap on the wrist for Mack based on what she was accused of?
I mean, it's very low, but the reason why it is because the prosecutors did ask for leniency. She gave a recording of that ceremony where the initials of Raniere was put on the women. I imagine that was very crucial and persuasive evidence at a trial to see this video. So she did help him get that Raniere such a high sentence was 120 years. This reminds me of the fact that I like to say often is that the legal system is inadequate in remedies. And this is an example of that. The harm that was done to these women, certainly 3 years is not going to remedy that situation. But from a legal standpoint, it made sense because she cooperated and helped put him away for a longer period of time.
Now, Terry, what do you make of the judge's words at sentencing, especially when you just heard Jessica's words about how Allison Mack was reacting in terms of that letter that was sent to her?
You know, it's interesting. The judge completely sided with the prosecution, as Dina was just mentioning. And the fact that we got this substantial assistance, I think, really did influence the judge and influence what the judge had to say. The other issue is, I do think that we had an apology here. She was a victim herself. She pled guilty, so she didn't waste taxpayer dollars. And at the end of the day, we did see that Keith Raniere got the 120 years, which is quite a long sentence. So I really think that we did what we needed to do here, and we got the main person involved behind bars.
Absolutely. It was moving for me to hear Jessica speak. Thank you both. Thank you for joining us here on Law and Crime Daily. We'll see you next time as we discuss justice in America.